Good afternoon and welcome to Africa's Vision Network. Africa's Vision Network features African cultural awareness, economic empowerment, spirituality, religion, education, and other issues focusing on the African world. I'm Robin Roberts, your host, and an African living in the diaspora. We have a very special guest today, Miss Gloria Fleming, and she is actually the producer of our program also. She's going to discuss the Ward family of Virginia. Gloria is a native of Jacksonville, Florida, who has lived in Arlington for over 50 years. She's a veteran of the United States Women Army Corps and a retired federal employee. Ms. Fleming has done extensive genealogical research on her family, the Brevard Ingram family, as well as assisted other families in their research. Her family history has been documented, copyrighted, and is part of the Family History Collection in the Library of Congress. She has attended many lectures and conferences in regard to African American history. She is a member of the local and African American Historical Genealogical Society chapter of the James Dent Walker and a member of the national chapter of the Afro American Historical and Genealogical Society since 1986. Gloria is a graduate of George Mason University with a degree in sociology. She is the mother of 2 sons, 1 deceased, and 2 grandchildren. We are pleased to have you as our guest this afternoon. Welcome to Africa's Vision Network.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to our introduction?
No, I think you just about said it all.
Gloria, could you tell us something about the Ward family?
Okay, the Ward family originally came from the Isle of Wight, Virginia. When I started out doing the research, I didn't know that part. Mm-hmm. And the Isle of Wight is a little small, old-fashioned town, I think where the Smithfield ham started.
Oh, okay.
And it's down near Petersburg and across the river from Williamsburg. It's down in that general area. Mm-hmm. And they're known for peanuts, too. And this family, I traced them back as far as 1820. They could have been there earlier, but I couldn't find any more records than that. Mm-hmm. And I found this Almeda Ward on the 1850 census with her 2 children, with more than 2 children. And then around 1870, I think they moved to Norfolk County, which is probably about 50 or 60 minutes away.
Gloria, could you tell the audience how you became familiar with the Ward family?
I became familiar with the Ward family through my late husband and his mother and sister. I used to take them to church. Mm-hmm. And we lived down in Chesapeake for about 4 or 5 years. And while I was down there, I met a lot of members of the Ward family because my husband was, a real friendly, gregarious type. Mm-hmm. So I met and saw everybody.
Can you tell us what inspired you to, get involved in this kind of research?
Well, I got involved in this research because I had heard Miss Fleming talking about Papa Joe and Mama Sally, and somehow or another in the back of my mind, I thought they were Native Americans. I don't know why. Maybe they told me that. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I only had seen the picture a few times, and over 20 years, if you have the picture, you have time to analyze it real deeply, and I didn't have time to analyze it. But I became interested from that point. And then I had gone to reunions that they had. And then in 1986, this Christine Ward, she just read information off the census about the family. Okay. But when she divorced her husband, she took all that with her.
Okay. As often happens.
And I just became interested from that point. And then in I think about 2009, when my granddaughter, she lived down in the in Portsmouth area right by the waterfront. and you could just catch the ferry and go over to Norfolk. And cross the water on that ferry, and that only took about 5 or 10 minutes. They had Sergeant Reynolds' research room that had a lot of material, and it was so easy for me to go over there. And so, I mean, the first time I went over there, you know, they had marriage data, and this marriage data say that this Ward family, at least the sister was from Isle of Wight County, Virginia. So it just created my interest. And then there was another young lady down there that was doing research, and I'll show you what she did later. And what she really did was just kind of pull the family together with birth, marriage, dates, and things like that.
Okay.
And she came over and talked to me, her and her mother. But I really, they didn't do the kind of research that I did. But that sparked my interest. And then also, while I was down there, and I had gone to a funeral, and I saw this Sylvester Brown that was part of the family. And when I got home, I called him and started asking him questions about the family. And then, you know, eventually we went down to Portsmouth.
Oh, yeah. I remember when we went down and filmed Mr. Sylvester. Can you tell us why information about the Isle of Wight would have been in Norfolk when you went over, when you caught the ferry over to, what information was housed over in Norfolk? When you said you went on to the ferry?
Well, when I was in Norfolk, a ferry ride was this research room that had old newspapers, marriage data material, a death data bank, and obituaries.
For that county?
Yeah.
For that county, okay. So
well, for that part of Virginia.
Oh, okay.
More than just that county. A marriage database can be for all over Virginia.
And
but this particular one, I think, was just for that county at that time.
Okay. So you said that they did different research than the type of research that you do?
Well, they didn't really do any research. You know, they just had family reunions and talked about Papa Joe.
Could you tell us something about the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, what type of research they help people do, or you learn about doing in that organization? Well, I don't know if they help
people do research. They have conferences every year where you can go and learn. But the first time I went down to the archives, I read up on my own.
Okay.
And I just went on down there and started doing the research.
So if a person were interested in researching their own family, how would they know where to begin?
Well, they'd want to start with their mother or their father and, you know, find out who their mother and father was and how far back they can go. And then, you know, like if they went back to 1940, well, they would be on the census for 1940. But now you can't see the 1950 census. The census is not available except for 72 years afterwards. Now, there are some cases where you might, if you know your aunt was on that census, and she agreed to let you get the information just on her, but you can't get it on anybody else. So, and I guess that's kind of like for privacy reasons.
So it's not available to the general public until 72 years after the information is recorded. But if I'm on the census, I can have access to it before 72 years?
No.
Oh, no one. Oh, even me.
You're not gonna be. You
well, I'm not. I don't mean me. Let's say my grandmother. My grandmother is 98. She's on the census, and she.
And now if
before 72 years were up, she wanted to see some information. Could she?
Now, if she was on the 1950 census, she could write in and get information just on her.
Can she write in and get information on the 1970 census?
No, I say 72 years.
Okay, that's what I want to know. So even if it's information on you, you still can't get it.
Right. Now, the Mormons have a lot of information only because of their religious belief. You know, they believe that, I guess, families meet together after death. So, I mean, they have a large library out there in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Okay.
And they have a Mormon library in nearly every city, too.
Oh, I didn't know that. And you and your group, the Afro-American Genealogical Society, Historical and Genealogical Society, you did take a trip out to the Mormon
Yeah,
I
went
guess
back.
it's a library out in Utah?
I went by train out there.
Okay. And when you got there, did you do some research on the Ward family or your family?
No, because I really had done most of the research.
Okay. And so getting back to the Ward family, can you tell us why you're talking about the Ward family today as opposed to maybe your own family?
Because they are more interesting. Well, my family was interesting too, but I have documented proof with this family because, for one thing, Virginia, their marriage license lists the name of the parents of both the bride and the groom. They list the name of the witnesses and other information. And so, therefore, you can kind of go back in time. And Virginia also recorded death information. Now, between 1895 and 1912, they weren't required to do it. But you might get that kind of information from cemeteries and other things. But they do have some death certificates, but they weren't required to during that time frame.
Okay. And could you compare for the audience the difference between doing research on the Ward family, who you had told me in prior conversations they were free, and people whose ancestors may have been enslaved? What's the difference in trying to find
The
that?
difference is that you are just a statistical number prior to 1870. You know, like Mr. Brevard may have had 10 female black slaves or 10 mulatto slaves. But when you're a free person of color, your name will show up on the census.
Okay.
And
okay.
that made it easier for me. Now, I mean, I didn't know all this information in the beginning, and I don't think that the family didn't know it either. But when I saw this death certificate, when we had that interview down in Portsmouth with Mr. Sylvester Brown that we all
Yes.
participated in, I went back and looked up Sally Ward's death certificate, and it stated who her mother was. And when I put her mother name in the database, up they came on the census in 1850.
Now, Sally Ward was who in relationship to, say, your late husband?
Sally Ward, Mammy Sally. Papa Joe was like my mother-in-law's grandfather. And then Papa Joe's mom was Mammy Sally.
Oh, okay.
And then Mammy Sally's mom was Almeda Ward, who was on that census,
What year was that?
1850.
Okay.
And then, and that's why once I found that out, and that they were from the Isle of Wight, I wanted to get down to the Isle of Wight. But when I got down there, they say, well, we don't have no free slave certificate. I said, oh, yes, you do. I say, let me get this book. I say, this lady right here, say she sat behind the desk, so I know that y'all have them. And she ran all around looking for them. And she said, well, I'm going to call the former clerk of the court at home. But she claimed she couldn't get him. But she did find a marriage certificate for this Almeda Ward from...
Can we see that book for a minute? And what is this book? I mean, what is this book about?
It's about the history of Isle of Wight County, but they have a section in there on the free people of color. And, you know, they have a section, and I'm going to go more into detail about what's in that book when we do the table display.
Okay. And this is a book of local history to the Isle of Wight.
Right, and I found I found the names, Sally and some of her sisters and brothers. So I knew I had the right person, and I knew that they were free people.
And you were saying earlier that most communities, they actually have someone who writes a local history. You'll be able to find a lot of local histories Like if you're looking for some history and you're
Yeah,
not in the Isle of Wight, you probably would still be able to find something.
Most cities, not like at the Library of Congress. Yeah, the Library of Congress. They have a local history section. They have a genealogy room down there, and you can go down. Of course, you don't have to do all that anymore because you can go on the internet.
Right.
But down at the Library of Congress, they have a local history section where they would have the history of whatever county you're researching, and you always want to know about the county because sometimes slave names show up in there.
They show up in the county.
In some of the history books.
Okay.
I mean, the only reason you're going to know that's them because you have to know something about who owned them.
Okay.
Because you didn't have last name. That's what's different about research in 1870. People that weren't free people of color, and people that were free people of color, because you're going to find more information,
Okay.
more than likely.
Okay.
I mean, you can still find information even if they weren't free people of color, because when a person dies, they will their slaves to their children, other people, so you can go look at their wills. And sometimes they have land maps where you see where, for example, with my family, the Brevard, you could see on the land map where this Mr. Brevard lived in 1820.
Oh, okay.
And you could see how they got rich with the slaves.
Okay. Let's see. You could maybe go and collect some of that
Now,
money.
now I don't think Isle of Wight County was no big slave. I don't think they have no big slave plantations.
Oh, okay.
And they were around the water, so they probably had a lot of occupations where people worked on the water. And they had a railroad system that started there about 1903.
So if I were looking, for my family history, and I talked with my grandmother, and the oldest living relative I could find was
They ain't gonna tell
her
you.
grandmother.
They're not gonna tell you nothing. Most times you have to keep badgering them.
But if you, okay, so that's one thing you have to badger your relatives.
Either
I
you
agree.
have to go out and do the research. My family never told me nothing. I had to
Okay.
go to the books to find out about them.
So if I got a name, so my grandmother tells me her grandmother's name was Frances also. Frances Oates after she got married. I don't know what her name was before
Oh, you
that.
have to ask people about all their different names, because if a person don't like their first name, they might use their second name. And you are looking on the census for Frances, and she might not like Frances. She might like Mary.
Well, I guess she would have been on the census at some point. She was born a slave, and then she, lived during emancipation, and she was free.
Now, sometime a person was 100 years old, they were emancipated, their name might show up on the census.
I'm sorry, they get emancipated at 100 years old. I guess so. That's a lot. Oh my, that's amazing. First time I've heard that. Okay.
And it's always interesting to go down to the courthouse yourself, even though they got everything on the internet. I mean, you always find more information, and you'll find people, all the family not always dead, like they say.
Oh, okay. Okay. So
And there always going to be somebody that knows some information.
and actually, they may not have put everything on the internet.
Right.
That's a possibility. So, what would you say to people who say about African Americans, especially whose, their ancestors were enslaved? You can't find any information on people who were enslaved.
If you try hard enough, eventually you go find something.
Okay.
I mean, of course, now it's like a puzzle. You may not be able to put all the pieces together. And that's why I like working with this Ward family, because on the Freeman Bureau, when they had loans, okay, this Almeda Ward was listed on their Freeman's Bureau records, and it named who her mother and father was, so therefore I could go back another generation. And it had her children's name on there, so I know I had the right person. And this was about 1870.
So, the Freedmen's Bureau, is that a physical location anymore?
Now they got a Freeman's Bank. This was the Freeman Bank. The Freeman Bank. The Freeman Bureau is different from the Freeman Bank. The Freeman Bank, you could go get a loan. Like probably when they left the Isle of Wight and moved to Norfolk County,
Right.
They
So
might have wanted some money or something.
was the Freedmen's Bank part of the Freedmen's Bureau?
I don't know if it was part of the Freedmen's Bureau or not. It might have been.
So
But the
if,
Freedmen's Bureau, they have information like if you have a land dispute or I guess if somebody stole something
okay.
or if
Okay.
somebody, even after slavery, some of the children might have been indentured out. So, I mean, things still kept, it didn't stop just because the slavery ended.
So if a person in 2015 wanted to find information that was housed with the Freedmen's Bureau, where would they find that now?
Now you can just go on the internet.
Oh, it's
Or
just
you
on the
can go
internet?
down to the archives and look
Okay.
through their records.
Oh, okay. Okay. So,
But
okay.
the Mormons, they probably becoming rich because, you know, they have Ancestry.com that they make money from, and then they have
Oh, I didn't know Ancestry.com was owned by the Mormons.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, those some rich people. I mean, when I was out there in Salt Lake City, I looked on the wall and saw Mr. Marriott.
You weren't a relative of his, were
No.
you? Okay, that's so the Mormons they're doing research on everybody, even people that they
It's
don't
not
think
that
are
they are doing.
Mormons.
Yeah, they gather data on everybody because that pool is for all, because every Mormon have to research their history. And if they have pulled together information, that mean that you could go to one of those Mormon libraries and,
Yeah, but I mean, conceivably,
well, I mean, I guess
I'm like a person like me may not be related to any
well,
Mormon.
they glad they did it. I mean, look how much money they making.
Okay, okay, but they can still do that. Tell me about your trip to Chesapeake when you went to interview Mr. Sylvester Brown.
Oh, okay, now I'm going to read some of what he said. Because he's the one that gave me all the information about Papa Joe. Now, he didn't know about the Isle of Wight or anything like that. But
And Papa Joe was his
Papa Joe was his
grandfather.
grandfather, and he lived in the house. There was two of the daughters lived in the house. Let me see. He remembered the stories about a young boy, Papa Joe, didn't attend school because he was light and fair complexion, and he would get teased by the children. And he didn't know how to read and write, and he learned to read and write from attending Olive Branch Baptist Church, the Sunday school department. And
Like many people did, they learned to read in church.
right,
Yeah.
right. At that church.
Actually still do. Yeah, and my godfather did that. He learned to read the Bible.
Right. And how I found out that Papa Joe was when I found out he was free, and how I found out who his father was, because his sister Dora had said on her marriage certificate that John Pruitt was her father. And the family just say Old Man Pruitt.
Okay.
And probably because Dora might have had a little bit more education, she could read and all that. And then one sister, one of Sylvester Brown's sisters down in Jacksonville, Florida, she told me that the story had been passed down from her mother, that on Saturdays when the men would be sitting around the tree drinking, he was sent from Mammy Sally, and she was about 12 or 13 years old. I guess that's how she got them two half-white children.
So when you said when the men would be sitting around drinking, what men are you talking about?
I guess some of the slave owners or some of the plantation owners. She didn't say slave owners, she just said plantation owners.
Right. Okay. And they just sent for it. But she was supposedly free at the time, right?
Well, that didn't mean anything because you were free.
Okay. So you're still subject to.
Right. And another reason that I think that John Pruitt, that lived 2 doors down from them on the census, and he was a justice. I mean, he was in the neighborhood.
Okay. So he was a prominent
Right.
slaveholder.
And his house is the house that the Prudence owned is still standing down the Isle of Wight, Virginia.
Oh,
And the
okay.
reason I know which is the house is because I asked one of the historians down there, I talked to him by telephone, and because I couldn't find out from the census about what area they lived in, and he told me to give him some of the names on the census, and I gave it to him. And then when he told me about what area they lived in, they on that map that I'll show you.
Oh, okay.
And of course, he told me I couldn't list his name down as a reference, which I don't care.
So can you mention it on this show?
No, because I don't. Because if somebody tell me something,
Oh, okay.
I'm
That
not
was the
going-
librarian saying, or the person holding the records, that you could not.
no, this was the person
Mention
I
his
talked
name.
to on the telephone.
And
I
he-
just took his name out of
yeah.
my mind.
Okay, yeah, smart
But
thing to do.
somebody told me that he still was on. He said he used to be on the historical committee, but somebody down there told me he still was on there.
Okay, and talking about records, could you tell us about the individual who the records hall was named after?
Yeah, I was going to tell you that. I'm going to talk to it when we get over to the table.
Okay.
But this is a black man, they call him Uncle Randall, I think. They named the courthouse, the record section, after him because during the Civil War, he hid out in the woods with all the records in a barrel or something, and and that kept the I guess the Union soldiers from burning the records.
Okay. And so you say that the wards are free blacks as opposed to, many blacks who had slavery in their ancestry.
Right.
What records substantiate that they were free people of color?
Because they're not going to be on the census, number one.
Okay.
You're not going to be on the census unless you happen to be in a household where the owner give the names of, maybe they have some house slaves, and maybe the owner give the names of everybody there in the household, but normally they don't do that.
Okay. So the census records would be the main indication that they were free people
now,
of color.
these free people were required once a year to go to the courthouse and register their freedom. However, I read in the book that, down in Isle of Wight County, I don't know how many people been down there, but that courthouse is sitting like out in the woods. And it would take a little while to walk to town, and they say a lot of them didn't get to town to register those records.
What would happen to them if they did not register?
They probably didn't find out.
Okay.
I mean, they didn't have no big plantations, so they probably didn't. And I don't know if people were getting beaten and all that, so they didn't probably have any reason to.
Okay, to do that.
Right.
To go.
And it also, you could get caught if you were, even though you were free, if you got caught, the slave rollers, I don't forget what they call them, the slave rollers, the paddy rollers, or whatever they call them,
patrol, yeah.
Could grab you and sell you to somebody else.
Okay.
Like they did in that movie, Solomon Northup.
Okay, yeah. They grabbed him. He was
Right.
obviously not a slave. How did you locate Papa Joe's sister's descendants?
Okay, now that one, they all had told me that Papa Joe's sister, that, let me see where it is, that she passed for white. She went over to the other side and all that. And Sylvester Brown said that when Mammy Sally would go to town to see her daughter and take flowers and fruit, she had to go through the back door.
Okay, presumably because the daughter was passing as white and
But
the
I
mother
don't-
was obviously black.
But I don't think they passed for white, because on the census they were listed as black people. Now they might have gone downtown to the dressing room and, pretended to be white so they could go on in and change, try on a dress or something.
So why do you think the mom was going in the back door?
That might have been the custom, if you lived in town. I mean, there are people now that don't want you to go in the front door.
Oh, so you think she may not have had anyone coming in her front door?
I mean, she could have let her mom come in there, but now I don't know. But sometime it could be custom. If people lived in town and had a nice home and they don't want you to track no dirt through the front.
Okay. It could have
Go
been.
around back and shake it all off before you go in my house.
Okay. What documents opened the door for connection with Papa Joe's sister's descendant in Washington, D.C.?
Okay. Well, I looked on the census, and I found that they had moved to D.C. But the main thing that was
Just a minute. When you say they, who are you saying? Who had moved to D.C.?
Dora and some of her children. Now, they
Okay.
say all of her children left, but there were some family members that stayed down there. But I looked on the newspaper database with my library card from Martin Luther King Library, and I saw a wedding that took place in 1939, and Dora was on it.
Okay. So,
And uh, that's how I knew a little bit about them. And then as I did the census, then I found that Wilhelmina Jackson Rolock, that she was Dora's granddaughter. And only because she's prominent in this area. You know, she was a member of the city council in D.C. And the
okay.
more prominent you are, the more your name can get in the newspaper. And plus in this area, now down in Tidewater, a lot of the newspaper articles I found down there were maybe they had an Easter program or somebody came to visit during
Yeah.
Easter. Now
Yeah.
they did. Now when this Dora died, there was a news article in the paper down in, and I got that through Norfolk Library with the Norfolk Library card.
Could you talk about that a little bit? You have a lot of library cards. How can you have those and you
Because
live
I
in
went
Arlington?
because I went down when I was staying at Gabby's house, and I went over to the library and I asked him if I could get a library card.
Okay.
And so I just call and renew it every year. And
Okay.
then when I came up here while I was staying down in Jacksonville for a year, I got a library card through DC, which
So,
means that I could use them at home. And I just make sure they renew because I just got an email saying to renew my library card with DC.
so a library card could be very valuable if you're trying to do family research.
Yeah, I mean, now if in Thomasville, Georgia, a library card wouldn't do me that much good.
What, they got libraries there?
They got libraries, but it's not a sophisticated
Right.
city. Now, Isle of Wight was a little small city, but it still was sophisticated enough to have history and all that. But Thomasville, Georgia, where my family came from, just a pretty little hick town.
Yeah. I know that my mom's from a small town like that, and I'm not sure the library is actually public. I believe the library is private.
And back to Papa Joe's sister Dora, well, once I found out who they were, and I started calling them, and then when I came back up here in 2013, three of them came over to the house to be interviewed by me, so I could, and so that's going to be book 2.
I was going to say, have they been on our program? I didn't think so.
No.
That's for your book.
Right.
Okay. How did a
Well,
death?
no, because the Ward family down there in Portsmouth, they moved together in a way.
Okay. Now, how did a death certificate help you in your research?
How? Because when I got that death certificate of Mommy Sally, it gave her mother's name. And when I put her mother's name, like I explained to you, when I put it in the database, she was on the 1860 census. Now, a death certificate might not help you if you have somebody that's lying, because some people are not going to tell the truth. I mean, if the dad was a big prominent judge and they don't want nobody to know it, well, they may not list the dad's name on the death certificate. They'll just maybe list somebody else.
Okay.
So it can help you, and maybe sometime it doesn't help you.
So this family research really is sort of like putting together a puzzle.
Yeah, and the Ward family was easier because every one of the children got married. So I had information on all of them. I was able to find a death certificate on everybody.
Okay.
They were stable. I guess that's what you can call it.
What inspired you to record your research in writing?
When I was down in Jacksonville, Florida, and I was going through chemotherapy and all that, and I had to have something to occupy my mind, So every day when I would come home from the chemotherapy, I would jump on the computer and start working. And it was, and plus there was a family member down there that was part of this family that I knew even before I knew about the family connection.
Down in
Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay.
Yeah, that was just purely coincidental.
That was a family member of the Ward family.
Right.
Okay, and just a coincidence that they lived in that area.
Right, and plus to put together a book down there is cheaper than up here.
Oh, okay, okay. Okay, it's much cheaper. Okay, and I wanted to ask a question about the Freedmen's Bureau's records. Exactly who's housed in those records? And anybody that's black?
I think the Freeman Bureau records are housed at the National Archives.
No, what I mean is who's going to appear in their records? I mean, just people who had been enslaved, or were the free blacks
anything
there?
that took place after slavery, or somebody abandoned their land. There was some dispute with the land. Anything like that could appear in there. So, and some of the information you can use, and some might not be that valuable to you.
But it's there.
It's there.
But so the Wards, they were free blacks. What reason might there be for them to be in the Freedmen's Bureau's records?
No, I don't know.
But you did find some information on
Freeman
them, right?
Bank records.
Okay, the Freedmen. Okay, but that was.
But they may need money after the enslavement period, because they were free. Don't mean they were floating around making a lot of money.
No, of course not. A lot of cotton picking that went on after that.
I don't know if there's that much cotton picking down in Isle of Wight.
Okay, yeah, that's true enough. Let's see. Do you have any useful tips to share with our audience? Well, before that, though, what's the earliest census you located of the Ward family in the Isle of Wight?
Back to 1820. And as early as 1820, they were free people of color. And the census started in 1790, so it'd only be
so
just a few years missing. And then there might be information out there on them, but I'd have to have some kind of way of knowing who I'm looking at. I mean, I'd have to have some kind of information or time together. I could tie the information I found on the census to know that's them. Now, after 1850, they only named the head of the household prior to 1850. So you'd have to find some other kind of records. You'd have to find some land records. Like I found the marriage record from 1850 or 1849. I forgot what date it was.
And you said the census began in 1790. So if you were trying to go back further than that, what would be your approach?
Well, I mean, you'd have to probably go back to, I mean, if you were black, I guess you'd probably go back to the islands or go back to Africa. And I don't know how easy that is. I mean, they do have ship records and things like that, but you still got to, you got to have a name, you got to have something to try to go back. I mean, if you find something, you probably just done hit the jackpot.
Yeah, I do imagine. Do you have any tips to share with our audience?
Let me see. I had a few things written down here. I think I say that always check your libraries, because your libraries have, most libraries have a genealogy section. And some of the libraries, you can call them on the telephone and they'll give you information on how busy they are, how nice they want to be.
When you go to the library's genealogical room,
I call them sometimes, just like I called down Isle of Wight, and I asked them if they had a John Prudent, and then that's when he looked up on the records that he was a justice.
When they have that kind of local genealogy,
and I just asked them to email it to me.
Do they have only people who were born there, or people who move into the vicinity? Who's in there?
Well, they have to. They're gonna concentrate mostly on the local area, Now, like the library over in Alexandria, Virginia, they have information for other places. And so it's according to your finances, and it's according to, this part of Virginia is a nice place to live. I mean, the information, the facilities, the libraries and things, they have very good libraries. I mean, up here you got the National Archives, you got the Daughters of the American Revolutionary Library, and if the person that owned you as a slave fought in the American Revolution, he's going to have some kind of record at the Daughters of the American Library.
Okay.
And in his history, he may list the names of his slaves.
So I still have another question about the local libraries, their genealogy history that they record. So I've been living in Arlington, let's say 12 years. Will I be in the library?
Well, see, in this area, you might, for one thing, you can go down to the Library of Congress. And they have newspapers, old newspapers.
Or of something I may have been in?
Right, and they have old records.
Okay, okay.
I mean, I remember when I was searching my family, and that Brevard name went back as far as, I don't forget whether it was in the 1700s, where they say this John Brevard came from France and settled in Ireland, and then came to the United States, and then he went down to North Carolina, and then his son, Joseph Brevard, went down to Camden, South Carolina, and then that's where my family originated down there. On my grandmother's father's side, originated down there in Camden, South Carolina. And that's a small town, but they still got big mansions down there.
So these Brevards originally from France and then Ireland,
Yeah.
they were Europeans?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you have been able to go back beyond.
But not like with these people where I can show you the proof.
Oh, okay. So you don't consider that like real proof because
Well,
of stories?
I mean, it's not like you could see something in black and white. Where you could put your fingers on it. You could take that book that I had and go through it and see it.
Okay. Any other useful tips? Well, while you're thinking of that, so
Newspapers, like I say.
Okay, local newspapers.
Local newspapers.
Okay, yeah. Like if you ever.
And just being a nut. Just picking up the telephone and calling people, and you'll be surprised.
No.
They'll answer your questions sometime.
What kind of family records might have some, history in them? Like I remember when my great aunt passed, she had this Bible.
All you got to do is steal, kill somebody, and you're gonna be in the news.
Yes, I know. Okay, Gloria. So this first part of the program, we have our interview, but we're going to come back and you're going to show us some artifacts that you brought with you,
Right.
some books and all, and you're going to give us a more in-depth examination into this.
I don't know about more in depth, but I'm going to give you some little tidbits out of it.
Okay. Thank you for joining us so far at Africa's Vision Network, and we hope you will stay tuned so you can catch the second half of our program. Welcome back to Africa's Vision Network. We have Gloria Fleming, our local historian. She's going to share some artifacts, some information about some artifacts that we have here in the studio. Could you tell us about this map, Gloria?
I purchased this from down in Isle of Wight. This map is in this book. And the historian I talked to down there on the telephone, the information he gave me, he mentioned these roads, and that's how come I knew I had the right house. And this house is still standing, and this is more than likely where the Ward family lived. Made it very convenient for Mr. Pruden. And this house is still standing, and they still have the slave cabins in the main house and some other information, and some Pruden descendants are living in the house. And when I went down, we stayed here along the Pagan River, and the railroad came here about uh, 1903. And this down here is just some of the information that I just mentioned about how, how I knew about where the house was because of the information that different people gave me. Like the lady down in Jacksonville said, you know, on Saturdays when they were sitting around the tree,
Right.
the plantation owners would meet, and it was probably down in here somewhere. I mean, I can't prove that.
That was a relative telling you that information.
Right.
Yeah.
That was a relative of Papa Joe, his daughter.
Okay.
And that's what's, and it's just nice to see the layout here now. When I wanted a map out of this book, the lady charged me $25 to use the map
Okay.
to get copyright permission to use it.
Okay.
And that's what's significant about this.
And
And more than likely, the people probably had occupations along the waterfront because as you can see, you got water here and you got water here. Now on this side, you don't have water. But you had the James River because I think even today you could take the ferry from Williamsburg over here.
oh, that's Williamsburg. Okay. Okay. Now, you said that you spoke with the historian and they were giving you some information on this map. This historian was the
He
librarian?
didn't give me no information on the map. He was just part of the Isle of Wight Historical Society.
Oh, okay. That's what I was wondering. Okay. So so you could be in contact with the
Right. So
historical society and localities
Right,
also.
now we need to go over here.
And could you tell us about this trifold?
Yeah, now this is a board that I put together on the family while I was down there in Jacksonville, Florida. This is Papa Joe right here, and this is his sister. Now I think he has some half brothers and sisters, but these are two whole brothers and sisters right here. And he's on the 1860, well both of them are on the 1860 map. She's about 1 year old and he's about 5 or 6, maybe a little bit older on the 1860 census. And these are his children. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's 9, 10. It's only one of them missing that I couldn't ever get a picture of.
Okay. Okay.
And this was a plaque of his wife, Leanna Ward, where she was died January 1908. And this was a family tree map that I had my nephew draw.
Okay.
And this is Dora Ward, the one that they say passed for white. They say he went to the other side, and that's what that means. And this was her husband, and he owned some kind of restaurant down there in Portsmouth. So for the times, they had a little bit of money.
Now, he was passing too. He
well,
doesn't
I
look like
mean-
he could pass.
Well, he probably...
I mean, maybe it's
Now,
the
they
photo.
said, well, they didn't go into about him. They just went into about her. And he died in about 1919. And then the family, a lot of them moved to D.C. And that's Wilhelmina Rolott. She was councilwoman over there in D.C. She died in 2006.
Okay.
And this is, wait a minute, this is her mother. And this is Dora's, one of her sons, and this is her other daughter. Now, she lived to be about 105.
Wow.
And I went over to a church in D.C. and they gave me some pictures out of a church book of her.
Now, this woman who lived to be 105 was Dora's daughter.
Right.
Is that okay?
Right.
And
these
is this Dora's daughter also, or is this her? Who was that?
That's her daughter.
Okay.
That's her daughter.
Okay.
And this is her daughter up in New York.
Boykin McCoy. Okay.
Right. And this is her son. This is the same one right here. As a young man, this is an older man. And that's about it for that. Now this one, he was a police officer up here in the district, and his daughter gave me that information.
Okay.
And his mother lived down in Portsmouth. She was one of her children that stayed in that area.
Okay. And,
Okay, now we got to go with these.
And can you tell us about some of these down here?
Yes, this book right here.
Let me stand up.
This is the Prudent House right here. Prudent House at Burnt Mill.
Oh, the one that's on that map.
Right. And then this is Uncle Randall, the one that saved the records that went out in the woods with the wheelbarrow to keep the Union soldiers from burning the records.
Okay.
And there's other interesting information in there, but that's about
Now, what book is this?
this Historic Isle of Wight.
This was done by a local historian.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And where did you purchase it from?
Isle of Wight. I sit down there for it. And
Okay.
this is the other book. And this is, let me see. This is the book that showed that John Prudent was a judge and how long he served and everything. And then this was about Randall Booth, which I've already talked about the one with the records. So I don't need to go over that anymore. And then this right here, this is the one that lists the Ward family free, a register of free Negro certificates: Sally Ward, Georgiana Ward, Patience Ward. And all three of those names are on that 1850 census, so I knew I had the right people
Why do you have some of them highlighted?
because those were possible family members. I know for sure those are,
Okay.
but I don't know for sure about the others. And this right here, Willie Brown down in Jacksonville, Florida. This came out of that book. What he did is every family member back to the present is on a picture on one of the pages. This was Sarah Ward's group, and let me see. And this is the one that did the book. And at the family reunion this year, they auctioned off a book, and somebody paid $400 for it.
You talking about this book?
Yeah.
Oh, so you're talking about, you came out of this
Right.
book here.
Right.
Okay.
Right, and then this right here was the first thing that I got from Carlos White. It really helped me put together who the children were, because she lists, the dates they got married.
What is this?
It's like a family tree.
It says family reunion. This is a booklet they gave out at the family reunion.
Right. And so from that, I went on. And this is the book I put together when I was down in Jacksonville. This is book 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then book 2 will be this book right here with Papa Joe
Okay.
on the front and Dora on the back.
So you're working on book 2 now.
Right. I mean, I got all the information together. I was trying
So
to
here's on the
get
back
some
of this
pictures.
one.
Yeah, those are pictures of some of the family members.
Descendants of Papa Joe.
Right.
Okay. Okay. I think we're out of time, Gloria. Thank you very much for being such a gracious guest and just sharing so much information. I'm going to go down and do some research right away.
Well, you better before your grandma dies.
Well, that is very true.
Be able to answer no questions.
Thank you very much for joining us again at Africa's Vision Network. We hope that you've been informed today, and stay tuned. We'll be having other great shows. Would you like to say anything else, Gloria?
I'd just like to say that I hope that I have inspired other people to go out and do a little history on their family.
You certainly have inspired me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.